I'm Susan Yockey with VOA's Middle East Monitor. Coming up, are weapons being looted from storage facilities in Libya? The Special Tribunal for Lebanon considers the assassination of a former prime minister. Indonesian migrant workers are leaving Saudi Arabia.
We push Indonesian as sending countries to negotiate with Saudi Arabia to make bilateral regulations to protect domestic workers there.
And the King Tut exhibit might be on its last tour for a while. It's all ahead on VOA. Libya's interim leader is urging NATO to stay in the country and continue its mission until at least the end of the year. Mustafa Abdel Jalil, who heads the National Transitional Council, said today the move would help prevent remnants of Muammar Gaddafi's loyalists from regrouping and posing a security threat. He made the appeal in Qatar at the first international planning conference for Libya since Gaddafi's death last week. However, NATO ambassadors are meeting today in Brussels to consider doing the opposite, ending the alliance's 7-month-old air campaign there sooner. They have decided to postpone a formal decision until Friday to allow time for more consultations with Libya's interim leaders. It is the possibility of real-style insurgency that is of real concern because there has been little or no oversight of the amount of weapons stockpiled by the Gaddafi government. Peter Bukrat is an investigator with Human Rights Watch. He's been in Libya for many months, and he tells VOA's Paul Westphaling all sorts of weapons, from rocket-propelled grenade launchers to surface-to-air missiles, have been looted from storage facilities because there is no one around to make sure they are secure.
Human Rights Watch has been visiting weapons storage facilities throughout Libya since February. Every time a city falls under the control of the rebel authorities, one of the first things we do is go to these weapons facilities. And time again, we have found vast stockpiles of weapons that are unsecured and being looted both by the rebels but also by just about anybody who can show up. Over the weekend, we found 2 facilities near the city of Sirte, one near the airport and another one about 100 kilometers south of Sirte, where there were vast stockpiles of weapons, including surface-to-air missiles, which could be used to shoot down civilian airplanes. There was just no security at these facilities, and just about anybody could walk up and take away whatever they want. And we're talking about vast numbers of weapons. I mean, you could come with an 18-wheeler for a couple of weeks and still be busy loading up stuff and taking it away. That's the kind of quantities we're talking about.
So there is still material in the warehouse. There's just not as much of it as there was.
Some of the warehouses have been completely emptied, but we're talking about 70 warehouses full of weapons, anything from tank rounds and mortar rounds to very precision-guided bombs weighing up to 2,000 pounds. There were also lots of weapons out in the desert. Apparently, the Gaddafi forces had taken a lot of the crates of weapons and placed them out in the desert because they were afraid that NATO or the U.S. would bomb their weapons facilities, and they were hoping that the weapons out in the desert would survive those airstrikes. Certainly, there are immense quantities of weapons floating around in Libya right now. According to one study I read, Libya had more weapons per soldier than any other army in the world. So it certainly is an issue of great concern to us, these weapons that are floating around.
I'm curious about one thing. You were part of that group that inspected the facilities, right?
Yes, I was there just over the weekend.
You and your group, did you walk up and announce that you were from Human Rights Watch, or could you have walked up and taken weapons away if you had wanted to?
Well, there was nobody to announce to that we were from Human Rights Watch. We found these facilities completely abandoned. There were a few other people around at one of the facilities driving around in pickup trucks, picking up their own weapons. But certainly there's no security at these facilities. Just about anybody can come and take away whatever they want, including surface-to-air missiles, which can shoot down civilian planes. The U.S. State Department now has a program trying to secure some of these weapons. They're mostly focused on the surface-to-air missiles, but I think we need to recognize that the other explosive weapons, the very ordinary tank shells and mortar shells and things like that, pose a much greater danger to the Libyan people, because that's what bad guys use to build car bombs and improvised explosive devices, which have wreaked such havoc in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. You think that's maybe where some of this stuff is headed?
We know that some of the stuff has already been intercepted in the Sinai Desert en route to Gaza. We know that some of the weapons are going south to Niger and Algeria. And certainly there are very angry people in Libya, pro-Gaddafi supporters, who are not happy with the change of government in Libya. And we are concerned that they could use some of these weapons to start a new insurgency against the new authorities in Libya. Much of the plans for the rebuilding of Libya and for the creation of a more open, human rights respecting society could literally go up in smoke if these weapons end up in the wrong hands, and we see the emergence of Iraq-style insurgency in the country.
Peter Buchart of Human Rights Watch speaking with us from the Libyan town of Misrata. We invite you to join in with your views at our online poll. This week we ask about the circumstances surrounding the death of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. You can cast your vote at voanews.com/ME and discuss the issue on Facebook on our Middle East Voices page. Members of the Islamist Party leading in the vote counting in Tunisia's historic election say the party intends to name one of its top leaders as its candidate for prime minister. Media reports today say the Ennahda party will propose its Secretary General, Hamadi Jabali, as the next head of Tunisia's government. Preliminary results of the vote indicate the moderate Hennadi party has captured the most seats in the 217-member assembly. It has already begun talks on forming an interim unity government with two center-left rivals, the Congress for the Republic and the Democratic Forum for Labor and Liberties. Ennahda candidates have cited as a model the secular pluralist democracy in Turkey, where the ruling party also has an Islamist identity. Election observers predict that women could capture nearly a third of the seats in the Constituent Assembly, a far larger proportion than in any Arab country. Tunisia's landmark election was widely considered free and fair. The vote came a little more than 9 months after Tunisians overthrew longtime President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. The Syrian government has turned hospitals into instruments of repression in its efforts to crush opposition, according to a new report by the London-based human rights group Amnesty International. Amnesty says wounded patients in at least 4 government-run hospitals have been subjected to torture and other ill treatment, including by medical workers. Henry Ridgewell has details from London in this report for VOA TV.
This is one of the videos Amnesty International says backs its accusation that hospital patients are being targeted. Aired on Syrian state television and posted on YouTube in April, the video appears to show a medic hitting an injured protester. Videos like this are impossible to verify independently because Syria won't allow Western journalists into the country. But Selina Nasser of Amnesty says the evidence she has gathered is overwhelming.
Even before I came across this video, we received consistent testimonies from wounded persons who were subjected to physical abuse at the hands of health professionals. And also testimonies from health professionals who are outraged by the conduct of their colleagues.
This video purports to show dead and injured protesters at a private clinic in the coastal city of Banias. Amnesty says the day after it was posted on YouTube in May, government forces raided the hospital looking for an alleged armed field commander opposed to the government.
We have documented, I think, 2 cases, one in Banias where they removed at least 11 wounded persons on 8 May, and another one that was more recent on September 7 in Homs. They raided Al Bir Wal Khadamat Hospital and removed 18 wounded persons. One of them was on a ventilator. They removed the ventilator and took him away along with the others.
The UN says more than 2,900 people have been killed in the crackdown on anti-government protests since they began in March. Activists say 10 people were killed in a crackdown on protests following the capture of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya last week. This footage, posted on a social media website, purports to show a man trying to retrieve a protester's body from a street in the city of Homs. What happens next is too graphic to broadcast. The rescuer is apparently shot by a sniper. Activists say both men died. Selina Nasser says doctors in hospitals face a tough choice.
They either treat the wounded, but they have to report these wounded persons to the authorities as instructed by the Ministry of Health, and therefore putting the wounded patients at risk of arrest and torture. And they are health professionals. How can they do that? Or they disobey the Ministry of Health's instructions and protect the wounded persons, not report them to the authorities, and therefore the health professionals themselves become a target of arrest and torture.
Nasser says this YouTube video shows a family who tried to care for the father's gunshot wounds at home. He died after 2 days. The family tried to preserve the body with ice to avoid having to take it to the morgue. According to Amnesty, doctors outside Syria, like this man in the United States, are posting videos on the internet to show Syrians too scared to go to the hospital how to treat wounds at home. Amnesty says it sent numerous letters to the Syrian government asking for a response to the allegations, but so far has received no answer. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
The Special Tribunal for Lebanon, the international court that is prosecuting 4 members of the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah over the assassination of former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, is entering a new phase in its proceedings. Lebanon has so far not paid its share of the court's budget, some $32 million, and Hezbollah has repeatedly said the 4 suspects will not be handed over to authorities, leading the Special Tribunal to look toward prosecuting the 4 accused in absentia. Reporter Jeff Newman joins us on the line from Beirut, Lebanon. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Good. Lebanon in the past has paid its share of the Special Tribunal's budget. Why is there a holdup now?
Well, the current government replaced the former government of Saad Hariri, who is Rafiq Hariri's son. And the new prime minister, Najib Mikati, he was nominated this past January with solid backing from Hezbollah and the March 8th Alliance. And currently, March 8th Alliance holds a majority in his cabinet. And so that's kind of been the holdup, including the justice minister is a March 8th member. So that's been the holdup so far. They're saying that they don't want to contribute to the funding.
The Special Tribunal is controversial in political circles, but how do the average Lebanese see it?
Talking to Lebanese about it, and, most do have an opinion about the Special Tribunal. It is pretty divided along sectarian lines. However, many Lebanese, regardless of sect, want to see justice served. But the past troubles with the STL has had with the former prosecutors who have left the court and been replaced, and the circumstantial evidence that they're presenting against the 4 Hezbollah members, it just leaves many Lebanese skeptical about the court.
Well, will there be any fallout if the 4 accused Hezbollah members are convicted in absentia?
I don't think there will be any major fallout. The accused, if convicted, wouldn't be handed over. Politicians on all sides will argue, but it's hard to imagine that any convictions would weaken Hezbollah's standing in Lebanon.
Well, where do the STL proceedings stand now?
As I wrote in my report, both sides are to submit their arguments on November 11th. Then the defense will have time to look over the evidence, and it seems that the court is looking to go ahead with the trial in absentia. So they will, most likely they're going to be prosecuting this case against 4 Hezbollah members in absentia.
The report you mentioned, of course, is the one you've written on our website at voanews.com/ME, and we will go there and read everything. Thank you, Jeff.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's reporter Jeff Newman speaking with us from Beirut, Lebanon.
Are you looking for a comprehensive daily look at events reshaping the Middle East? Visit voanews.com/ME. You'll find VOA's original reporting from the region. in-depth analysis from our Washington team, VIP interviews, online polls, photo essays, and mini documentaries. Bookmark us or add us to your RSS reader. That's voanews.com/ME.
During the past month, Indonesia has issued special travel documents in lieu of passports to some 4,550 of its citizens in Saudi Arabia, who claim they are trying to escape poor labor conditions or abusive employers. But with more than 2 million Indonesian migrant workers still in the country, the government is under increasing pressure to formalize their protection with the Gulf nation. Kate Lamb reports from Jakarta.
Indonesian authorities flew home some 2,500 of the migrant workers on their new travel documents in late September. The other 2,000 are being housed in a shelter near Jeddah and will return to Indonesia at the end of the month. Authorities say most of the applicants for the documents are domestic workers who were forced to surrender their passport to their employers as part of their employment agreement. Such measures are common in Saudi Arabia, where domestic workers have few legal protections. Anis Hidayah is the executive director of Migrant Care, a group in Jakarta that advocates rights for migrant workers. She wants a formal agreement between the two countries protecting their basic human rights.
In Saudi Arabia, there are no national regulation about domestic workers. But Saudi is the big country that there are so many domestic workers. So how to bridge the situation is we push Indonesian as sending countries to negotiate with Saudi Arabia to make bilateral regulation to protect domestic workers there. Without MOU or bilateral agreement, I think the protection is very low for domestic workers.
Hidayah says the agreement should focus on setting minimum wages, days off, and allow migrant workers to retain their passports. The treatment of workers in Saudi Arabia has been a heated political topic in Indonesia since June, when Saudi authorities executed 54-year-old maid Riyati binti Sapubi. The Indonesian woman was beheaded for killing her employer, an action she said was motivated by self-defense, harsh working conditions, and constant verbal abuse. Saudi officials later apologized for failing to inform Indonesian authorities before the execution. Jakarta responded by barring migrant workers from going to the country. The ban since August 1st continues, but more than 2 million Indonesians working in the country still have few legal protections. Foreign Ministry spokesman Michael Tene says both sides have an interest in resolving the dispute, and the government is working closely with the Saudi government to negotiate better conditions.
We have imposed a moratorium of sending new workers to Saudi Arabia, and this moratorium will only be lifted once we are satisfied that the necessary necessary arrangement to protect our workers in Saudi and is in place. And there is a process that is going on between our government and the Saudi government. There's no such time limit. Of course, if that negotiations can be done at an early stage or can be finalized earlier, that would be better.
Worldwide, Indonesian migrant workers send back more than $7 billion each year. Money that supporters say is one of the country's most effective forms of poverty alleviation. With 2.5 million Indonesian migrant workers in Saudi Arabia, critics say the government is more interested in the amount of remittances the workers send home to their families and contribute to the local economy. Although Tene says the government is negotiating the release of the 43 Indonesian maids currently on death row, he also adds that many Indonesian workers do not have severe problems with their employees in the Saudi kingdom. For VOA News, this is Kate Lamb in Jakarta.
What is it like to study in the United States, and what do you have to do to get here? The Student Union is VOA's blog that follows students from all over the world as they face challenges and opportunities of studying at American universities. Log on at blogs.voanews.com/student-union.
As Egypt goes through fundamental political change, people fascinated by the country's ancient civilization worry that a new government might restrict loans to museums overseas. Among the most successful commercial ventures involving Egyptian antiquities have been traveling exhibits of treasures from the tomb of King Tut, as he is better known. One of those exhibits is now drawing crowds at the Museum of Fine Arts in the U.S. city of Houston, Texas. Many people visiting the museum fear this could be their last chance to see such magnificent and important antiquities. VOA's Greg Flakis was on hand for Tut's opening in Houston.
This exhibit is called Tutankhamun, the Golden King and the Great Pharaohs. It shows the splendor of ancient Egypt through artworks and jewelry, as well as ordinary objects like this bed. Visitors like Ayana feel drawn to the world of these ancient people.
3,000 years ago, and I'm still able to see things that they touched and felt and interacted with. It's just amazing.
King Tut rested in obscurity until British archaeologist Howard Carter found his tomb in 1922, more than 3,000 years after his death. But since then, he has become an international superstar, thanks in part to films of the National Geographic Society, which was a sponsor of this event. Catherine Keene, the Society's Director of Traveling Exhibitions, says the world knows Tut because his tomb was mostly intact when Carter found it.
There are much, much larger tombs and burial sites and much more prominent pharaohs than King Tut. But all of those tombs had been looted or otherwise disturbed over time.
Keene says the National Geographic Society has been following Tut ever since.
And new discoveries are constantly being made in Egypt, so we will be there as long as there are stories to tell.
The stories in this exhibit include recent DNA samples from Tut's mummy, genetically linking him to Egyptian royals who preceded him, and tests showing an infection in a broken leg that might have caused his death at the age of 19. Egypt is building a huge new museum to house its ancient treasures, and some observers fear a new government may be less willing to allow treasures like these to leave the country again. Mark Locke is a vice president with Arts and Exhibitions International, the company that organized this exhibit. He's more optimistic.
My sense is that Egypt will always want to share their history with the world, and through exhibitions they will do that.
This show is also raking in money for Egypt, something the country needs to maintain its treasures at home. Abdelhamid Marouf is an official with Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities.
Because you use this exhibition everywhere in the world to gain the money for the conservation and preservation of our monuments.
What exhibitions have also done is bring this ancient culture to the U.S. heartland, where people might not have been able otherwise to see such treasures.
It's been spectacular, not only the reception of the exhibition, but how people have been affected, and that's been a joy of ours to be part of that.
After it leaves Houston next April, the exhibition moves to its final U.S. stop in Seattle. Greg Flakis, VOA News, Houston.
This has been VOA's Middle East Monitor. Join us Monday through Friday for news from the region and of interest to the region. Coming up on International Edition, clashes in the Philippines could threaten government peace talks. Thanks for tuning in to the Voice of America.
For more on the stories you've heard on our radio programs, visit our website at voanews.com. That's where you'll find in-depth reports, related stories, videos, and more from our team of correspondents. Or take the news with you by downloading podcasts of your favorite VOA program. That's at voanews.com.
voanews.com.
Online news for a changing world.